For thousands of years, Earth was ruled by ice. Massive glaciers covered continents. Mammoths, saber-toothed cats, and giant sloths roamed frozen plains. Early humans struggled to survive in a world of extreme cold and sudden climate shifts. But the Ice Age was more than a time of giants and glaciers. It was a turning point in human history. Wolves became our first companions. Artists painted breathtaking images deep inside caves. Humans crossed a lost land bridge into the Americas. Neanderthals disappeared. Supervolcanoes erupted. Entire species vanished. Then, almost suddenly, the ice began to melt. What caused the sudden freezes and rapid warming? Why did so many giants disappear? And how did the end of the Ice Age shape the rise of civilization? Let's uncover the greatest secrets of the Ice Age. Chapter 1: The Sudden Freeze. The Younger Dryas Mystery. Around 12,900 years ago, the world changed in a way no one alive at the time could have predicted. The last Ice Age was slowly ending. Massive glaciers that had covered much of North America and Northern Europe were retreating. Temperatures were rising. Forests were spreading. Animals were returning to lands once buried under ice. It seemed like Earth was finally warming for good. And then suddenly it wasn't. Within what may have been only a few decades, temperatures in the North Atlantic region dropped sharply. In some places, especially around Greenland, the climate snapped back to near glacial conditions. The warming trend stopped. Cold returned. This strange and dramatic event is now known as the Younger Dryas. Scientists did not discover the Younger Dryas through ancient stories or myths. They found it locked inside ice. In the mid-20th century, researchers began drilling deep into the Greenland ice sheet. These ice cores were like frozen time capsules. Year after year, snow had fallen, compressed, and trapped tiny air bubbles from the ancient atmosphere. By studying the layers, scientists could measure past temperatures and even analyze ancient greenhouse gases. In the 1960s and 1970s, as more detailed ice cores were examined, something unexpected appeared. Around 12,900 years ago, the chemical signals in the ice showed a sudden cooling. Oxygen isotope levels shifted sharply. This was not a slow drift. It looked like a cliff. Further analysis suggested that temperatures in Greenland may have dropped by as much as 10 degrees Celsius in a short period of time. In climate terms, that is enormous. Even more surprising, this cold period lasted for about 1,200 years before warming resumed again around 11,700 years ago, marking the true end of the Ice Age and the beginning of the Holocene. The name Younger Dryas comes from a small Arctic flower called Dryas octopetala. Its pollen became common in European sediment layers during this cold period. When scientists found increased amounts of this cold-loving plant in lake sediments across Europe, they realized something significant had happened. Warmer plants had been replaced by species adapted to harsh, tundra-like conditions. Lake beds, peat bogs, and ocean sediments all began to tell the same story. In Germany, in the Netherlands, and in Scandinavia, sediment layers showed a sudden shift in vegetation. In North America, evidence from glacial lakes and fossil pollen suggested rapid cooling and drying. It was not just Greenland. The climate system itself had been disrupted. But what could cause such a sudden freeze during a warming trend? One leading theory focuses on ocean circulation. The Atlantic Ocean plays a powerful role in moving heat around the planet. Warm water flows northward from the tropics in a system often called the Atlantic Meridional Overturning Circulation. When that warm water reaches the North Atlantic, it cools, sinks, and helps drive global currents. During the end of the Ice Age, massive ice sheets were melting. One enormous glacial lake in North America, known as Lake Agassiz, held vast amounts of fresh water. At some point, researchers believe that a huge pulse of this fresh water may have poured into the North Atlantic. Fresh water is lighter than salty ocean water. If enough fresh water entered the ocean, it could weaken or disrupt the sinking process that drives circulation. Without that flow, less heat would reach the north. The result could be rapid cooling across the North Atlantic region. There is geological evidence supporting this idea. Ancient shorelines and sediment deposits suggest sudden drainage events from glacial lakes. Computer climate models show that a large freshwater input could indeed trigger cooling similar to what is seen in the Younger Dryas record. But not everyone agrees that fresh water alone explains the mystery. In 2007, a group of researchers proposed a more dramatic theory. They suggested that a cosmic impact, a comet or fragmented asteroid, struck Earth around 12,900 years ago. According to this hypothesis, the impact caused widespread wildfires, threw dust into the atmosphere, and triggered abrupt climate change. Supporters of this Younger Dryas impact hypothesis point to unusual materials found in the sediment layers dated to the beginning of the Younger Dryas. These include tiny spherules, nanodiamonds, and elevated levels of platinum in some locations. In Greenland ice cores, a spike in platinum concentration was identified in layers from around this time. Some researchers argue that these materials are consistent with an extraterrestrial event. They also note that the Younger Dryas roughly coincides with the decline of the Clovis culture in North America and the extinction of many large Ice Age animals, including mammoths, mastodons, and giant ground sloths. However, the impact theory remains highly debated. Many scientists have challenged the findings. Some studies have failed to reproduce the evidence of nanodiamonds or impact markers at multiple sites. Others argue that the materials could have formed through natural terrestrial processes, such as volcanic activity or wildfires. Major scientific organizations have not reached a consensus supporting the impact theory. Instead, most climate researchers continue to favor ocean circulation changes as the primary cause, though even that explanation is still being refined. What makes the Younger Dryas so important is not only the science but its timing. Around 12,900 years ago, humans were living across Europe, Asia, and North America as hunter-gatherers. In the Levant region of the Middle East, a culture known as the Natufians had begun settling in more permanent villages. They were harvesting wild grains and building stone structures. Some archaeologists see them as standing on the edge of agriculture. Then the climate turned cold and it dry again. Archaeological evidence from sites like Abu Huraira in modern-day Syria suggests that communities face sudden environmental stress during the Younger Dryas. Plant remains show a shift toward hardier species. There is evidence that people may have intensified their use of wild cereals. Some researchers believe that this pressure may have pushed humans toward cultivating crops deliberately. If true, the Younger Dryas may have played a role in the birth of agriculture. It may not have caused farming directly, but it created conditions that encouraged innovation and adaptation. In North America, the Younger Dryas overlaps with the disappearance of the Clovis culture, known for its distinctive fluted spear points. Around the same time, many large mammals vanished. Whether climate, human hunting, or other factors were responsible is still debated, but the timing has kept the Younger Dryas at the center of the discussions about extinction. The climate records themselves continue to improve. Ice cores from Greenland, such as the GISP2 and GRIP projects, provide year-by-year data. These records show that the end of the Younger Dryas warming was also abrupt. Around 11,700 years ago, temperatures rose sharply again, sometimes within decades. This pattern suggests that Earth's climate system can shift very quickly under certain conditions. The Younger Dryas is often studied today as a warning from the past. It reminds scientists that large climate systems, like ocean circulation, are sensitive. Importantly, the Younger Dryas was not equally cold everywhere. While the North Atlantic region experienced strong cooling, other parts of the world showed different patterns. Some areas of the southern hemisphere may have warmed slightly. This uneven response highlights how complex global climate systems are. There are still open questions. How much fresh water entered the ocean and exactly when? Were there multiple pulses? Did volcanic eruptions play any supporting role? Why did the cold period last about 1,200 years and then end so suddenly? Researchers continue drilling deeper ice cores. They analyze microscopic pollen grains. They refine climate models. Each new discovery adds detail, but it rarely simplifies the story. The Younger Dryas stands as one of the clearest examples of abrupt climate change in Earth's recent history. It was not a myth. It was not gradual. It was recorded in ice, in mud, in ancient seeds and bones. And yet the trigger remains uncertain. Was it meltwater disrupting ocean currents? A rare cosmic event? A combination of factors interacting in ways we do not fully understand? What we do know is this: 12,900 years ago, Just as the Ice Age seemed to be loosening its grip, the cold returned with force. For more than 1,000 years, humans and animals had to endure a world that changed faster than expected. When the warming finally resumed around 11,700 years ago, it marked the true beginning of the stable climate that allowed cities, agriculture, and civilization to rise. The younger Dryas reminds us that stability is never guaranteed. Even during a time of overall warming, the climate system proved capable of sudden reversal. It is a mystery grounded not in legend, but in measurable evidence. A freeze recorded in ice, a shift written in pollen, a moment when the world hesitated before moving forward. And even now, thousands of years later, scientists are still listening carefully to what that frozen chapter of history is trying to tell us. Chapter 2. The Disappearance of the Mammoths. For thousands of years, woolly mammoths walked across the frozen plains of the Ice Age. They moved in herds across what is now Siberia, Europe, and North America. Thick fur covered their massive bodies. Curved tusks stretched forward like ivory sides. They were not rare creatures hidden in remote corners of the world. They were everywhere. And then they were gone. The woolly mammoth, known scientifically as Mammoths primigenius, survived through some of the harshest climates on Earth. They thrived during the last ice age, when cold grasslands, often called the mammoth steppe, stretched across the northern hemisphere. These dry, open landscapes supported large grazing animals, and mammoths were among the most successful. Their fossils have been found across vast regions. In Siberia, entire skeletons have emerged from riverbanks. In Alaska and Canada, tusks and bones have been uncovered in frozen soil. But some of the most striking discoveries came from deep permafrost in northern Russia. In 1901, a nearly complete frozen mammoth was discovered near the Berezovka River in Siberia. Its body was so well preserved that researchers could examine its stomach contents. Later discoveries, including baby mammoths like Luba, found in 2007 on the Yamal Peninsula, revealed skin, fur, and even internal organs. These frozen remains allowed scientists to study mammoths in detail, not just as bones, but as once living animals. Radiocarbon dating has helped researchers build a timeline of their disappearance. On mainland Eurasia and North America, mammoths largely vanished around 10,000 years ago, near the end of the Ice Age. This timing overlaps closely with the warming period that followed the younger Dryas and the broader transition into the Holocene. But extinction was not instant everywhere. In 1993, scientists confirmed that a small population of mammoths survived on Wrangel Island, north of Siberia, until about 4,000 years ago. That means mammoths were still alive while ancient civilizations were rising in places like Egypt and Mesopotamia. On another Arctic island, St. Paul Island in Alaska, mammoths survived until around 5,600 years ago. These isolated populations raise important questions. If mammoths survived thousands of years after the Ice Age ended, what finally pushed them over the edge? One major theory focuses on climate change. As the Ice Age ended, glaciers retreated and temperatures rose. The vast dry grasslands that mammoths depended on began to shrink. Forests spread northward, wetlands expanded. The mammoth steppe slowly disappeared. Pollen records from lake sediments show clear changes in vegetation. Grasses declined in many regions, replaced by shrubs and trees. Mammoths were specialized grazers. Their large molars were built for chewing tough grasses, not browsing leaves from trees. As their habitat changed, food sources may have become less reliable. Climate warming also fragmented populations. Instead of one connected range across continents, mammoths were left in smaller, isolated groups. Smaller populations are more vulnerable. They face greater risk from disease, environmental stress, and random events. Genetic studies support this idea. In 2015, researchers published findings from mammoth DNA extracted from Wrangel Island specimens. The results showed reduced genetic diversity compared to earlier mainland mammoths. Harmful mutations appear to have accumulated in the island population. This suggests that inbreeding may have weakened the last surviving groups. But climate alone may not tell the whole story. The timing of mammoth extinction in many regions closely matches the arrival of humans. In North America, humans associated with the Clovis culture appeared around 13,000 years ago. These early hunter-gatherers used distinctive fluted spear points. Archaeological sites in places like Blackwater Draw in New Mexico and the Dent site in Colorado have yielded mammoth bones alongside stone tools. Some mammoth skeletons show cut marks consistent with butchering. At the Murray Springs site in Arizona, evidence suggests humans hunted and processed mammoths. These discoveries have fueled the overkill hypothesis, first proposed by geoscientist Paul Martin in the 1960s. He argued that human hunting spread rapidly across the Americas, driving large animals to extinction. Supporters of this theory point to patterns across continents. In Australia and the Americas, large Ice Age animals disappeared soon after humans arrived. In Africa, where humans and megafauna evolved together, far fewer large animals went extinct. This contrast suggests that newly arrived human hunters may have had a powerful impact. However, critics argue that direct evidence of large-scale mammoth hunting is limited. While some sites show human interaction, they are relatively few compared to the vast number of mammoth fossils found without clear signs of hunting. It is possible that humans hunted mammoths occasionally, but whether they hunted them enough to cause extinction remains debated. There is also the question of speed. Did mammoths disappear rapidly in a wave of overhunting? Or did their numbers decline slowly over thousands of years due to combined pressures? Many researchers now favor a combined explanation. Climate change reduced mammoth habitat and fragmented populations. Humans added additional stress through hunting and competition for resources. Together, these pressures may have pushed already vulnerable populations toward collapse. On Wrangel Island, the situation may have been different. There is currently no strong evidence that humans reached the island before mammoths disappeared. Instead, rising sea levels isolated the island population. Freshwater shortages and environmental change may have played a role in their final decline. The broader pattern of megafauna extinction adds another layer to the mystery. Mammoths were not alone in vanishing. Mastodons, giant ground sloths, saber-toothed cats, and many other large species disappeared between 10,000 and 12,000 years ago. This global pattern suggests widespread environmental change. But the exact mix of causes likely varied by region. Modern science continues to uncover details. Stable isotope analysis of mammoth tusks reveals seasonal movement patterns. Ancient DNA allows researchers to trace population history. Computer models simulate how hunting and habitat loss interact over time. Yet despite all this data, there is no single moment we can point to and say, this is when the last mammoth fell. Instead, extinction appears to have been uneven. Some regions lost mammoths early. Others held on longer. Small island populations survived in isolation before finally fading away. Today, mammoths remain frozen in Arctic soil, sometimes emerging as permafrost melts. Each discovery offers another glimpse into a vanished world. Their thick fur and curved tusks remind us that they were once as real and alive as any elephant today. Their disappearance was not caused by myth or legend. It was shaped by climate shifts, changing landscapes, and possibly human expansion. It was a complex process unfolding over centuries. The mystery of the mammoths is not about whether they existed. We have their bones, their DNA, even their preserved bodies. The real question is why a species so successful for hundreds of thousands of years could not survive the final transition out of the Ice Age. Perhaps there was no single trigger. Perhaps it was a slow narrowing of options, a shrinking habitat, smaller herds, fewer calves surviving harsh winters, more pressure from human hunters, less room to adapt. In the end, the woolly mammoth became a symbol of the Ice Age itself, majestic, resilient, and ultimately unable to outlast a world that was changing too quickly. Their extinction reminds us that survival is never guaranteed, even for giants. Chapter 3: The Lost Giants of the Ice Age. The woolly mammoth was often remembered as the great symbol of the Ice Age, but it was only one member of a much larger world of giants. Across the continents, massive animals once roamed landscapes that feel almost mythical today. Giant ground sloths the size of elephants moved slowly through forests in the Americas. Saber-toothed cats, known as Smilodon, stalked prey with curved fangs as long as a human hand. Dire wolves hunted in packs across North America, and towering over many of them, was the short-faced bear, Arctodicimus, one of the largest land carnivores ever to exist. Then between roughly 12,000 and 10,000 years ago, most of them vanished. The disappearance of these Ice Age giants is known as the Late Pleistocene megafauna extinction. It did not happen in one place. It happened across continents. Fossil records, cave deposits, and radiocarbon dating all show a similar pattern. Large animals, especially those weighing more than 44 kilograms, declined sharply near the end of the last ice age. In North America, fossils show that mammoths, mastodons, giant beavers, ground sloths, and American lions disappeared around 11,000 to 10,500 years ago. At sites like Rancho La Brea in California, tar pits have preserved bones of saber-toothed cats, dire wolves, and other predators that once thrived. The fossil layers show that these species were common for thousands of years. Then, their remains stop appearing. In South America, the story is similar. Giant armadillo-like creatures, called glyptodonts, vanished. So did massive ground sloths such as Megatherium. Radiocarbon dates cluster around the same period, close to the end of the Ice Age. Australia tells another part of the story. There, giant kangaroos, enormous, flightless birds like Genyornis, and massive reptiles disappeared earlier, around 40,000 years ago. That timing closely follows the arrival of humans on the continent. In contrast, Africa experienced far fewer extinctions of large mammals during this period. This uneven pattern is one of the most important clues in the mystery. Scientists began seriously debating these extinctions in the mid-20th century. One of the most influential ideas came from geoscientist Paul Martin in the 1960s. He proposed the overkill hypothesis. According to this theory, when modern humans spread into new continents, they hunted large animals faster than those animals could reproduce. In regions like North America and Australia, megafauna had never encountered highly skilled human hunters before. They were not adapted to this new threat. Supporters of the overkill hypothesis point to timing. In Australia, megafauna disappeared soon after humans arrived around 50,000 to 40,000 years ago. In the Americas, many extinctions happened shortly after the first widespread human cultures, such as the Clovis people, appeared around 13,000 years ago. The pattern seems consistent. Humans arrive, large animals disappear. There is archaeological evidence of hunting. At several sites in North America, stone tools have been found near mammoth and mastodon bones bearing cut marks. Some sites show what appear to be organized kill locations. But for many species, direct evidence of large-scale hunting is limited. There are far fewer confirmed kill sites than the number of animals that vanished. This gap has led some researchers to question whether hunting alone could explain such widespread extinction. Another major explanation focuses on climate stress. The end of the Ice Age brought dramatic environmental changes. Glaciers melted, sea levels rose, forests replaced grasslands in many areas, precipitation patterns shifted. These changes transformed habitats that megafauna depended on. Large animals often require vast territories and stable food supplies. As landscapes fragmented, populations may have shrunk. In North America, for example, the mammoth steppe, a dry, grass-rich ecosystem, gradually gave way to forests and wetlands. Grazing species would have faced reduced forage. Predators that depended on them would have suffered as well. Ice core data and pollen records show that the climate shifts were not always slow. There were abrupt changes, such as the Younger Dryas cold period. Rapid swings in temperature and moisture could have stressed ecosystems already under pressure. Still, climate change alone does not fully explain the global pattern. Large animals had survived previous glacial cycles for hundreds of thousands of years. Why did this particular transition prove so deadly? This is where comparisons between continents become crucial. In Africa, where modern humans evolved, large mammals such as elephants, rhinos, and lions survived into the present. While there were some extinctions, the scale was far smaller than in Australia or the Americas. One explanation is that African megafauna co-evolved with human ancestors over millions of years. They adapted to human hunting and behavior. They developed caution and defensive strategies. In contrast, animals in Australia and the Americas encountered fully modern humans relatively suddenly in evolutionary terms. They may not have recognized humans as a major threat until it was too late. Newer research often combines both ideas. climate and human impact, rather than choosing one over the other. Computer models now simulate how hunting pressure interacts with shrinking habitats. Some studies suggest that even moderate hunting, when added to climate stress, could push vulnerable populations past a tipping point. For example, a declining species with low reproduction rates may survive climate shifts alone. It may also survive limited hunting alone. But when both pressures happen at the same time, recovery becomes difficult. The short-faced bear provides an interesting case. This massive predator lived in North America and stood taller than a modern grizzly when on its hind legs. Fossils show that it disappeared around the same time as many herbivores. Some scientists suggest that as prey animals decline due to environmental change or hunting, large predators could not find enough food. Their extinction may have been indirect. Similarly, dire wolves and saber-toothed cats depended on large herbivores. When those prey species vanished, predators would have struggled to adapt to smaller animals. In Australia, evidence from ancient eggshells of the giant bird Genyornis suggests possible human interaction. Burned eggshell fragments have been found at archaeological sites, indicating that early humans may have harvested eggs. But climate data also shows increasing aridity around the same time. Even today, researchers continue debating how quickly these extinctions unfolded. Some argue for rapid collapses within a few centuries. Others believe the decline stretched over thousands of years, with local populations disappearing at different times. Radiocarbon dating has improved precision, but challenges remain. Dates must be carefully calibrated, fossil records are incomplete. Absence of evidence is not always evidence of absence. What remains clear is the scale of the loss. Entire ecological communities changed. The disappearance of large herbivores likely altered vegetation patterns. Without mammoths and ground sloths to knock down trees and graze heavily, forests may have expanded differently. Some scientists even suggest that megafauna extinction may have influenced fire patterns and nutrient cycles. The Ice Age giants were not just impressive animals. They shaped their environments. Despite decades of study, no single explanation fully accounts for the global pattern. The extinction was too widespread for a simple answer. It involved climate shifts, human expansion, ecosystem changes, and perhaps local events unique to certain regions. The mystery of the lost giants is not about whether they existed. Their bones fill museums. Their tracks are preserved in ancient sediments. Their DNA has been sequenced. The real question is why a world that had supported massive animals for hundreds of thousands of years changed so quickly near the end of the Ice Age. Perhaps the answer lies not in one dramatic moment, but in a convergence of pressures. A warming planet, shifting habitats, expanding human populations, fragile ecosystems reaching their limits. Whatever the precise cause, the result was the same. By the time the Holocene began around 11,700 years ago, the age of giants had ended. And with their disappearance, the balance of life on Earth shifted into something closer to the world we know today. Chapter 4. The Mystery of Dog Domestication. Long before cities, before farming, and before written history, there was a quiet partnership forming in the cold landscapes of the Ice Age. Wolves moved across frozen plains in organized packs. Humans, too, lived in small groups, hunting and gathering across vast territories. At some point, these two hunters began to draw closer to one another. The dog, known scientifically as Canis lupus familiaris, is widely accepted as the first animal domesticated by humans. But when that transformation began, remains one of archaeology's most debated questions. For many years, researchers believed dogs were domesticated around 14,000 years ago. This estimate came from clear archaeological evidence. In 1914, near Bonn, Germany, workers uncovered what became known as the Bonn-Oberkassel dog. The remains were buried alongside two humans and dated to about 14,200 years ago. The animal's bones showed signs of illness that would have required human care. This was not a wild wolf. It was something different, an animal living within a human community. Other early burials support this idea. At the site of Ein Malaha in Israel, dating to around 12,000 years ago, a woman was buried with a puppy tucked in against her body. In Siberia, near Lake Baikal, dog burials from roughly 7,000 to 8,000 years ago show animals placed carefully in graves, sometimes with grave goods. These were not simply tools or food sources. They held emotional value. Yet genetic studies suggest the story may go back even further. In 2016, a team of researchers analyzed ancient dog genomes and proposed that domestication could have begun as early as 20,000 to 40,000 years ago. This timeline pushes the origin deep into the Upper Paleolithic period. However, the genetic data is complex. Some studies suggest a single domestication event. Others propose that wolves may have been domesticated independently in different regions, perhaps in both Europe and East Asia. Ancient DNA has revealed that modern dogs are closely related to ancient gray wolves. But pinpointing exactly which wolf populations gave rise to dogs has proven difficult. Many ancient wolf lineages have disappeared. The genetic landscape of the Ice Age was far more diverse than it is today. One theory that has gained strong support is the self-domestication model. According to this idea, wolves may have begun approaching human camps to scavenge leftover food. The less aggressive wolves, those willing to tolerate humans, would have had easier access to scraps. Over generations, natural selection favored calmer individuals. Gradually, these wolves adapted to life near humans. This process would not have required humans to capture wolf pups intentionally at first. Instead, it may have been a slow shift driven by survival advantages. Tamer wolves stayed close to camps. More aggressive ones stayed away. Over time, physical changes followed behavioral ones. Archaeologists studying fossil skulls have identified subtle differences between early dogs and wolves. Early dog skulls often show shorter snouts and smaller teeth. Brain case shapes differ slightly. However, these differences are not always easy to interpret. Wolves can vary widely in size and shape depending on environment. One famous specimen discovered in 2008 in Belgium, known as the Goyer dog, was dated to around 31,000 years ago. Its skull had dog-like features, but some researchers argue that it may represent a failed domestication attempt rather than a direct ancestor of modern dogs. The debate over single versus multiple domestication events remains unresolved. A 2016 study published in Science suggested that dogs may have been domesticated twice, once in East Asia and once in Europe, with one lineage eventually replacing the other. Later research challenged this idea, proposing instead a single origin from an unknown wolf population that is now extinct. While genetics continues to refine the timeline, archaeology provides insight into how this partnership changed human life. Ice Age hunter-gatherers lived in harsh conditions. Survival required cooperation, communication, and awareness of danger. A wolf that lingered near camp might have offered early warning against predators or rival groups. Wolves possess sharp senses, especially smell and hearing. Even a semi-tamed animal could provide security. Over time, the relationship may have deepened. Dogs could assist in hunting by tracking prey, cornering animals, or retrieving carcasses. In snowy environments, they may have helped transport goods. Their presence could have improved hunting success, giving human groups a competitive advantage. There is also growing evidence that dogs influence human migration. In Arctic regions, sled dogs became essential for transport. While sled technology developed later, the roots of human canine cooperation began much earlier. Importantly, dog domestication appears to have occurred before the development of agriculture. This makes it different from the domestication of animals like sheep, goats, or cattle, which were linked to farming societies. Dogs emerged during a time when humans were still fully nomadic. This suggests that emotional bonds may have played a role alongside practical benefits. The burial of dogs with humans indicates attachment. In the case of the Bonn Oberkassel dog, researchers found evidence that the animal survived a severe case of canine distemper. It would not have lived without human care. Someone fed it. Someone protected it. That kind of care points to something deeper than convenience. The Ice Age setting makes this transformation even more remarkable. These were not settled villages with spare resources. These were small groups living on the edge of survival, and yet they made room for another species. Despite decades of research, the exact location of first domestication remains unknown. Was it in Europe, where some of the oldest dog-like fossils have been found? Was it in Siberia or East Asia, where genetic diversity in modern dogs is high? Or did domestication begin in multiple places at once? As humans and wolves shared similar habitats across the northern hemisphere, the mystery continues because evidence is scattered and incomplete. Bones can be damaged, DNA degrades over time, and the line between wolf and early dog is thin. What is clear is that domestication was not a single event. It was a process, a gradual shift from wary coexistence to partnership. It unfolded over generations, perhaps over thousands of years. Today, dogs live in homes across the world. They guard, guide, herd, and comfort. Their diversity, from tiny lap dogs to powerful working breeds, reflects thousands of years of shared history. But their story began in the cold landscapes of the Ice Age, when humans and wolves first learned to trust each other. The mystery of dog domestication is not about whether it happened. It is about when, where, and how often. It is about the slow shaping of behavior, the quiet shift from predator to partner. And in that ancient transformation, we see one of humanity's earliest and most enduring alliances, formed not through force alone, but through adaptation, survival, and perhaps something close to friendship. Chapter 5. Ice Age Art. Why did humans suddenly create masterpieces? About 40,000 years ago, something changed inside the human mind. In the deep darkness of caves across Europe, people began to create images that still leave us speechless today. They painted charging bison, running horses, woolly rhinoceroses, and lions with careful detail and movement. They pressed their hands against stone walls and blew pigment around their fingers, leaving behind ghostly silhouettes. They carved small figurines from ivory and stone. These were not simple marks. They were masterpieces. One of the most famous sites is the Cave of Lascaux in southwestern France. Discovered in 1940 by 4 teenagers and their dog, the cave revealed over 600 painted animals and thousands of engraved images. Horses gallop across the walls. Bulls appear massive and powerful. The scenes are layered with overlapping figures, showing careful composition. Lascaux is dated to around 17,000 years ago, during the Magdalenian period of the Upper Paleolithic. Even older is Chauvet Cave, also in France, discovered in 1994. The paintings inside Chauvet stunned researchers. Radiocarbon dating of charcoal drawings revealed ages of around 36,000 years. Some of the animals are drawn with shading and perspective that feel almost modern. Lions appear in motion, their bodies overlapping in a way that suggests storytelling. Rhinos seem to charge forward. These are not crude sketches. From the beginning, the art is confident and skilled. In northern Spain, the Cave of Altamira contains vivid images of bison painted on the ceiling. First discovered in the late 19th century, these paintings were initially dismissed as fakes because experts could not believe such ancient people were capable of this level of art. Later discoveries proved their authenticity. The bison of Altamira are now dated to around 14,000 years ago. The dating of cave art relies on careful scientific methods. When charcoal was used in drawing, scientists apply radiocarbon dating to measure the age of the carbon. In caves where mineral deposits formed over paintings, uranium-thorium dating can determine when the calcite layer developed. This helps establish minimum ages. Together, these methods have confirmed that cave art stretches back at least 40,000 years in Europe. But Europe is not the only region with early art. In Indonesia, hand stencils and animal paintings found in Sulawesi caves have been dated to more than 45,000 years ago. This suggests that symbolic art emerged very early in human history, possibly soon after modern humans left Africa. What makes Ice Age art so mysterious is how advanced it appears from the start. There is no clear record of a slow progression from simple shapes to complex scenes. Instead, the earliest known examples already show careful use of natural rock contours to create depth. Artists selected cave walls that enhanced the shapes of animals. They mixed pigments from minerals like ochre, manganese, and charcoal. Some images were placed in deep chambers, far from natural light. This sudden artistic expression raises important questions. What changed in the human brain around this time? Many researchers link the rise of art to what is called behavioral modernity. This term refers to the development of complex language, abstract thinking, and symbolic communication. By 40,000 years ago, Homo sapiens may have reached a cognitive threshold that allowed imagination and shared storytelling to flourish. But why paint deep inside caves? Some researchers suggest that cave art had spiritual meaning. The placement of many paintings in remote, dark chambers hints at ritual use. In Chauvet, some animal bones were carefully arranged near painted panels. In certain caves, footprints of children and adults show that groups traveled together into the darkness. The effort required to reach these spaces suggests intention. Another theory is that the paintings were connected to hunting magic. By depicting animals, perhaps people believed they could gain power over them. This idea was popular in early 20th century archaeology, though it is less widely accepted today. Many painted animals such as lions and rhinos were dangerous predators, not typical prey. Some scholars believe the art functioned as storytelling or shared memory. Images may have helped pass down knowledge about animal behavior, migration patterns, or cultural myths. The repetition of certain symbols across caves suggests a shared system of meaning. Abstract signs, dots, lines, and geometric shapes appear again and again. These signs may represent early symbolic language. Handprints are among the most powerful images. In caves like El Castillo in Spain, red hand stencils date back over 37,000 years. To create them, a person placed a hand against the wall and blew pigment over it. The result is a negative silhouette. It feels personal. Someone stood there and marked their presence. It is one of the clearest connections between us and them. Beyond cave walls, small carved figurines offer more insight. The Venus figurines, found across Europe and dated between 25,000 and 30,000 years ago, depict female forms with exaggerated features. The Venus of Willendorf, discovered in Austria in 1908, is one of the most famous. Carved from limestone and covered in red ochre, the figure is small enough to hold in one hand. The purpose of these figurines remains debated. Some researchers believe they symbolize fertility or motherhood. Others argue they may represent idealized forms, social identity, or even self-representation by women. Like cave paintings, their meaning is not written down. We interpret them through context and comparison. The emotional depth of Ice Age art is striking. Animals are shown with motion and life. In Chauvet, lines are drawn without manes, suggesting careful observation of real behavior. The artists were not guessing. They knew their subjects well. Yet despite decades of study, the true purpose of these masterpieces remains unknown. There are no written records explaining their intent. We are left with images and silence. The sudden emergence of art during the Ice Age suggests something profound about the human mind. It marks a shift from simple survival to symbolic expression. These people were not only hunters, they were thinkers, creators, and storytellers. Art required planning. It required shared understanding. It required imagination. Deep in those caves under flickering torchlight, humans began expressing ideas that could not be spoken in simple survival terms. Perhaps the mystery is not why they created art, but why we are surprised that they did. Ice Age humans were anatomically modern. Their brains were as large as ours. Their lives were harsh, but that does not mean their minds were limited. The paintings of Lascaux and Chauvet show creativity, emotion, and skill equal to any later culture. We may never fully understand the meaning behind the bison on the ceiling of Altamira or the lines of Chauvet, but their existence tells us something clear. Around 40,000 years ago, humans began leaving messages, not just for their own generation, but for the distant future. The caves preserved those messages in darkness and silence for tens of thousands of years. When we step inside today, we are not just looking at art. We are witnessing the moment when the human mind turned inward, imagined something greater, and placed it on stone. In that quiet shift, symbolic culture was born. Chapter 6. The Bering Land Bridge. Crossing into a new world. At the height of the last ice age, the world looked very different from today. Vast ice sheets covered much of northern and North America. Sea levels were more than 100 meters lower than they are now. Coastlines stretched far beyond their present limits, and between Siberia and Alaska, a broad landmass connected two continents. This land was called Beringia. Beringia was not a narrow strip of land. At its widest, it stretched over 1,000 kilometers from north to south. It was a cold but dry region, covered in grasslands, shrubs, and scattered trees. Large animals such as mammoths, bison, and horses moved across it freely. For thousands of years, it served as a bridge between Asia and North America. The question that has shaped generations of research is simple. When did humans cross it? For much of the 20th century, the dominant theory was known as Clovis first. According to this model, the first people entered North America around 13,000 years ago. This idea was based on discoveries near Clovis, New Mexico, where distinctive fluted stone spear points were found alongside mammoth bones. Radiocarbon dating placed these artifacts at around 13,200 years ago. Clovis technology was impressive. The spear points were carefully shaped with a fluted base, allowing them to be attached to wooden shafts. For decades, no older human sites were widely accepted in the Americas. It seemed that Clovis people were the first. But archaeology rarely stays still. In the late 20th century, evidence began to challenge this timeline. One of the most important sites is Monteverde in southern Chile. Excavated by archaeologist Tom Dillhay, Monteverde contains preserved wooden structures, stone tools, and plant remains. Radiocarbon dates place human activity there at least 14,500 years ago, more than 1,000 years before Clovis. Monteverde forced researchers to rethink the story. If people were already living in southern Chile by 14,500 years ago, they must have entered North America even earlier. Other pre-Clovis sites followed. In Texas, the Galt and Buttermilk Creek sites revealed stone tools, possibly dating back more than 15,000 years. In Oregon, the Paisley Caves produced ancient human DNA from coprolites, fossilized human waste, dated to around 14,300 years ago. In Florida, the Page-Ladson site provided evidence of human presence around 14,500 years ago. Each discovery added pressure to the Clovis first theory. Gradually, the idea that Clovis represented the first Americans faded. Instead, Clovis became seen as one cultural tradition among earlier populations. Genetic research has added another layer to the story. Studies of modern Native American DNA show clear links to ancient populations from Siberia and East Asia. Genome sequencing suggests that the ancestors of Native Americans separated from other Asian groups around 25,000 years ago. Some researchers propose what is known as the Beringian standstill hypothesis. According to this idea, a population of humans moved into Beringia during the Ice Age, but became isolated there for thousands of years. Ice sheets blocked movement south into North America, while harsh conditions limited return to Asia. During this period, genetic traits unique to Native Americans developed. When the ice sheets began to retreat around 16,000 to 14,000 years ago, these groups finally moved south into the Americas. But how exactly did they travel? For many years, scientists believed that people walked through an inland ice-free corridor. As the massive Laurentide and Cordilleran ice sheets began to separate in Western Canada, a corridor opened between them. This route would have allowed migration from Alaska into the central plains of North America. However, recent environmental reconstructions suggest that this corridor may not have been biologically viable until after 13,000 years ago. Studies of ancient plant DNA in sediment cores show that the corridor lacked sufficient food resources before that time. If people were already in Chile by 14,500 years ago, they likely did not rely on this inland path. This has led to growing support for the coastal migration theory. According to this model, early humans traveled along the Pacific coastline, possibly using small boats. Even during the Ice Age, parts of the coast remained ice-free. Marine resources such as fish, shellfish, and sea mammals would have provided steady food supplies. Archaeological evidence along the Pacific coast is limited, partly because rising sea levels submerged many ancient shorelines. Sites that once stood near the ocean are now underwater. Still, some coastal sites in British Columbia and Alaska show early human activity dating back more than 14,000 years. Environmental studies indicate that kelp forests along the Pacific Rim could have supported continuous human movement from Northeast Asia down the coast of North America. This kelp highway may have allowed rapid migration. What remains striking is how quickly humans spread once they entered the Americas. By 14,500 years ago, people had reached southern South America. Within a few thousand years, humans occupied nearly every part of the continents, from the Arctic to Patagonia. Stone tool traditions vary across regions, suggesting cultural diversity rather than a single uniform migration wave. Clovis tools represent one adaptation among many. Other tool types, some older and distinct, point to complex settlement patterns. Despite this progress, many questions remain unresolved. Exactly when did humans first step into Beringia? Was it 20,000 years ago or earlier? Did migration happen in one major wave or multiple waves over time? How many groups crossed and how large were they? New techniques continue to refine the picture. Ancient DNA extracted from skeletal remains helps trace population movements. Environmental DNA recovered from soil layers reveals past ecosystems. Underwater archaeology may one day uncover submerged coastal camps. Beringia itself is now mostly underwater, beneath the Bering Sea. Only parts of Alaska and eastern Siberia remain above water. The land bridge that once connected continents has disappeared, hidden beneath waves. Yet its role in human history is profound. The crossing of Beringia was not a single dramatic march. It was likely a gradual movement of small groups following animals, adapting to shifting climates, and exploring new lands. It unfolded over generations. The Bering Land Bridge represents more than geography. It marks the moment when humans entered a new world. From that crossing came thousands of cultures, languages, and civilizations across the Americas. We may never know the exact day the first footsteps pressed into Beringian soil, but through stone tools, genetic evidence, and environmental reconstruction, we can trace the path they took. It was a journey shaped by ice, sea, and survival, and it changed the course of human history forever. Chapter 7. The Mystery of Ice Age. Giants in Frozen Time. In the far north of Siberia and Alaska, the ground does not fully thaw. Beneath the surface lies permafrost, soil that has remained frozen for thousands of years. In some places, it has stayed frozen since the last ice age. Inside this frozen earth, time has been paused. Over the past century, melting riverbanks and collapsing hillsides have revealed astonishing discoveries. Not just bones, not just fragments. Entire animals have emerged from the ice, their fur still attached, their skin intact, sometimes even their last meal preserved inside their stomachs. One of the earliest and most famous discoveries occurred in 1901 near the Berezovka River in Siberia. A woolly mammoth carcass was found eroding from a frozen bank. Its body was so well preserved that scientists could examine its internal organs. Grass was still visible between its teeth. The mammoth had likely died suddenly, frozen before decay could take hold. In 2007, reindeer herders in the Yamal Peninsula of Siberia discovered a remarkably intact baby mammoth later named Luba. She was estimated to be about 1 month old when she died around 42,000 years ago. Her body was nearly complete. Her trunk, eyelids, and even whiskers were preserved. CT scans revealed mud in her lungs and stomach, suggesting she may have suffocated after falling into a muddy riverbank. Luba provided rare insight into mammoth biology. Scientists studied her milk teeth, muscle tissue, and even bacteria preserved in her digestive tract. Her remains helped confirm what mammoths ate and how they developed. For researchers, she was not just a fossil, she was a window into Ice Age life. Mammoths are not the only creatures found in frozen time. In 2015, 2 cave lion cubs were discovered in Siberia's Sakha Republic. The cubs, named Uyan and Dina, were so well preserved that their fur and facial features were clearly visible. Cave lions, known scientifically as Panthera spelaea, once roamed across Eurasia and North America. These cubs were dated to around 12,000 years ago. Their small bodies suggested they were only weeks old when they died. In 2018, another discovery shocked researchers. A perfectly preserved Ice Age wolf's head was found along the Terechyak River in Siberia. Radiocarbon dating placed it at around 32,000 years old. The head still had fur, teeth, and even parts of the brain tissue. This specimen offered new data on the genetic relationship between ancient wolves and modern dogs. These frozen animals provide more than dramatic images. They allow scientists to study soft tissue, something rarely preserved in fossils. Muscle fibers, skin layers, and stomach contents reveal diet and health. Isotope analysis of hair can show seasonal movement patterns. Even ancient parasites have been identified inside some specimens. Permafrost preservation works because of rapid freezing and constant low temperatures. When an animal dies in freezing conditions and is quickly buried by sediment or mud, oxygen cannot easily reach the body. Without oxygen, bacteria that cause decay are slowed dramatically. The frozen ground locks the remains in place. But some discoveries raise difficult questions. In several cases, animals appear to have died suddenly. The Berezovka mammoth was found in a position suggesting it may have fallen into a ravine. Luba's lungs were filled with mud. Some mammoths have been found with undigested grass still in their mouths. This suggests a rapid death followed by immediate freezing. Researchers study local geology to understand these events. During the Ice Age, permafrost landscapes were unstable. Seasonal thawing could cause mudslides or slumping riverbanks. When warm periods melted surface layers, animals grazing near water could fall into soft mud and become trapped. If temperatures dropped again quickly, their bodies would freeze in place. In Arctic regions, sudden storms and snow accumulation could also play a role. A young animal weakened by hunger or injury might collapse and be covered by snow. Over time, additional sediment layers would protect it from scavengers. Climate fluctuations during the late Pleistocene likely contributed to these preservation conditions. Rapid warming and cooling cycles created unstable terrain. The melting of surface ice layers could trigger ground collapse, a process known as thermokarst. Entire sections of land could sink or slide, burying animals beneath mud and debris. Modern climate change has increased the rate of permafrost thaw. As Arctic temperatures rise, more frozen remains are emerging. In some cases, tusks are exposed along riverbanks. In others, complete carcasses appear as the ground erodes. This has sparked both scientific interest and concern. Scientists must act quickly when new specimens are discovered. Once exposed to air and warmer temperatures, decomposition accelerates. Bacteria begin to break down tissues that remain stable for tens of thousands of years. The preservation of ancient blood residues has also drawn attention. In some mammoth remains, researchers have identified liquid blood-like material inside frozen tissues. However, these substances are not fresh blood in the usual sense. They are partially preserved fluids protected by freezing conditions. While headlines sometimes suggest dramatic possibilities, scientists approach these finds cautiously. Genetic research has benefited greatly from permafrost discoveries. In 2015, scientists sequenced high-quality genomes from mammoth remains found in Siberia. These studies revealed population changes over time. Genetic diversity declined in isolated groups such as those on Wrangel Island, supporting theories of inbreeding before extinction. Frozen remains also help reconstruct Ice Age environments. Plant fragments and stomach contents show what animals were eating. Pollen trapped in fur reveals local vegetation. Even tiny insects preserved nearby provide clues about temperature and habitat. Despite the scientific explanations, there remains a quiet sense of mystery when looking at these frozen faces. A lion cub with closed eyes. A baby mammoth curled as if asleep. A wolf's head emerging from ancient soil. Their preservation feels almost unnatural, as if time paused mid-moment. But paleontologists stress that there is no supernatural element here. Freezing temperatures, rapid burial, and low oxygen conditions create natural preservation. Similar processes can preserve human bodies in glaciers or peat bogs. Still, the suddenness of some deaths invites questions. Did rapid climate shifts during the younger Dryas or other cold events contribute to these burial conditions? Did environmental instability increase accidents and mud flows? Researchers continue to examine sediment layers and ice cores to align animal deaths with climate data. The frozen giants of Siberia and Alaska remind us that the Ice Age was not just a time of slow change. It was dynamic. Rivers shifted course, landscapes collapsed, temperatures swung sharply. Permafrost has acted as a vault, protecting these remains for tens of thousands of years. Each discovery adds detail to the story of Ice Age life and extinction. These animals once walked across open tundra under vast skies. They hunted, grazed, raised young, and endured harsh winters. When they died, the cold earth claimed them gently but firmly. Today, as they emerge from melting ground, they speak again, not in words but in evidence. Through muscle tissue, DNA, and preserved fur, they tell us about a world long vanished. The mystery is not why they were preserved. Science explains that clearly. The deeper question is what their final moments reveal about a changing planet, and how fragile even the mightiest creatures can be when the ground beneath them shifts. Chapter 8. The Ice Age Supervolcanoes. Around 39,000 years ago, during the cold grip of the Ice Age, the ground beneath southern Italy erupted with unimaginable force. Near what is now Naples, a massive volcanic explosion sent ash and rock high into the atmosphere. This event is known as the Campanian Ignimbrite eruption. It remains one of the largest volcanic eruptions in Europe over the past 200,000 years. The eruption came from the Phlegraean Fields, a vast volcanic area west of modern-day Naples. Unlike a single cone-shaped volcano, this region is a caldera, a large depression formed after earlier eruptions emptied underground magma chambers. When the Campanian Ignimbrite erupted, it expelled hundreds of cubic kilometers of volcanic material. Ash spread across the Mediterranean and deep into Eastern Europe. Geologists have traced the eruption through a distinctive layer of volcanic ash found in sediment cores, cave deposits, and archaeological sites. This ash layer acts like a timestamp. Wherever it appears, researchers know they are looking at sediments from roughly 39,000 years ago. The material, known as tephra, has a unique chemical fingerprint that matches the Italian source. In southern Italy, thick deposits of ignimbrite, hardened volcanic ash and pumice, blanket the landscape. In some areas, the deposits are tens of meters thick. Closer to the eruption site, pyroclastic flows would have raced across the ground at terrifying speed, destroying everything in their path. But the effects were not limited to Italy. Ash from the Campanian Ignimbrite has been identified as far away as Russia. It appears in marine sediment cores from the Mediterranean Sea and in cave formations in Romania. Ice cores from Greenland show signs of volcanic sulfate layers from around this period, though connecting them precisely to this eruption requires careful analysis. Scientists estimate that the eruption released large amounts of sulfur dioxide into the atmosphere. When sulfur dioxide rises into the stratosphere, it forms tiny particles that reflect sunlight. This can cool the Earth's surface, creating what is known as a volcanic winter. Volcanic winters have been observed in modern times on smaller scales. After the eruption of Mount Tambora in 1815, global temperatures dropped, leading to what became known as the year without a summer. Crops failed in parts of Europe and North America. The Campanian Ignimbrite eruption was far larger than Tambora. Climate models suggest that such an eruption during the Ice Age could have lowered temperatures by several degrees for years, possibly even decades. In a world already cold and unstable, this additional cooling may have intensified harsh conditions. At the time of the eruption, Europe was inhabited by both Neanderthals and early modern humans. Neanderthals had lived across the continent for hundreds of thousands of years. Modern humans were expanding into Europe, arriving from Africa perhaps as early as 45,000 years ago. The timing has led some researchers to suggest that the Campanian Ignimbrite eruption may have contributed to the decline of the Neanderthals. If ash clouds darkened skies and disrupted plant growth, food chains would have been stressed. Large herbivores might have declined. Hunting would have become more difficult. Archaeological layers across parts of Eastern Europe show evidence of population gaps around this time. In certain areas, there appears to be a reduction in Neanderthal sites shortly after the eruption. This has fueled speculation that the volcanic event played a role in their disappearance. However, the picture is not simple. Other researchers argue that Neanderthals survived in Western Europe for several thousand years after the eruption. Sites in Spain and France show continued Neanderthal presence well after 39,000 years ago. This suggests that while the eruption may have had regional impacts, it did not cause immediate extinction. The decline of Neanderthals likely involved multiple factors. Climate fluctuations, competition with modern humans, and small population sizes all played roles. The volcanic eruption may have added stress, but most experts do not view it as a single decisive blow. The eruption also affected early modern humans living in Europe. Archaeological sites in the Balkans and parts of Eastern Europe show eruptions in occupation layers. In some caves, ash deposits sit directly between cultural layers, marking a break in habitation. Yet humans returned. They adapted. Volcanic ash layers have become valuable tools for archaeologists. Because the Campanian ignimbrite ash can be chemically identified, it helps synchronize timelines across distant sites. When the same ash layer appears in different regions, researchers can compare human activity before and after the eruption with greater precision. The Ice Age itself was a period of repeated climate swings. Ice cores from Greenland reveal rapid warming and cooling events known as Dansgaard-Oeschger cycles. These abrupt shifts created unstable environments. A supereruption during such a time would have layered one crisis on top of another. The Campanian ignimbrite was not the only significant eruption during the Ice Age. Other volcanic events occurred in regions like Iceland and Central America. While not all were supereruptions, their combined effects added complexity to the climate system. Geologists study ancient eruptions by examining rock layers, volcanic glass shards, and mineral composition. Radiometric dating techniques help determine ages with increasing accuracy. Climate scientists feed eruption data into computer models to estimate atmospheric effects. One key question remains: how severe was the cooling caused by the Campanian ignimbrite? Some models suggest that temperatures in parts of Europe may have dropped significantly for a few years. Others indicate that the cooling was more moderate and short-lived. Ice Age conditions may have limited how much additional cooling was possible, since the climate system was already cold. Volcanic winters are usually temporary. Ash and sulfate particles settle out of the atmosphere within years. Unlike long-term changes driven by greenhouse gases or orbital cycles, volcanic cooling tends to fade. The Ice Age continued for tens of thousands of years after the eruption, shaped more by Earth's orbital patterns than by a single event. Still, for people living at the time, even a few years of failed seasons could have been devastating. Hunter-gatherer groups depended on animal migrations and plant cycles. Disruption in one season could ripple through entire regions. Yet humans and Neanderthals had already survived harsh climates for millennia. They were resilient. They moved when necessary. They adapted tools and strategies. The Ice Age Supervolcanoes remind us that natural forces can shift landscapes and skies in an instant. Ash clouds blot out sunlight. Rivers change course. Forests are buried. But extinction rarely follows a straight line. The Campanian ignimbrite eruption stands as one of the most powerful geological events in Europe's recent prehistory. It left a scar in the rock record and a marker in archaeological timelines. It may have intensified hardship for ancient populations, but it did not erase humanity. Today, the Phlegraean fields remain volcanically active. The ground there still rises and falls slowly as magma moves beneath the surface. The ancient eruption is a reminder of the forces still at work under our feet. During the Ice Age, amid cold winds and advancing glaciers, the Earth itself roared. Fire met ice, ash met snow, and through it all, early humans endured. The true human impact of these eruptions remains debated. What is clear is that life continued. In the shadow of supervolcanoes, people adapted once again, proving that survival in the Ice Age required not just strength, but flexibility in the face of sudden change. Chapter 9: Neanderthals. Why did they disappear? For more than 300,000 years, Neanderthals lived across Europe and Western Asia. They endured multiple Ice Age cycles. They survived brutal winters, shifting landscapes, and long periods of isolation. They hunted large animals, built shelters, controlled fire, and crafted stone tools with skill. And then around 40,000 years ago, they disappeared. The question of why they vanished remains one of the greatest mysteries of human history. Neanderthals were first discovered in 1856 in Germany's Neander Valley. Workers found unusual bones in a limestone quarry. At first, scientists debated what they were. Eventually, the remains were recognized as belonging to a distinct human species, later named Homo neanderthalensis. Since then, fossils have been uncovered across France, Spain, Italy, the Middle East, and as far east as Siberia. Physically, Neanderthals were powerful. They had thick bones, strong muscles, and large brains, on average slightly larger than modern humans. Their skulls had prominent brow ridges and a distinct shape at the back. These features were adaptations to cold climates. Their wide noses may have helped warm icy air before it reached their lungs. For much of the 20th century, Neanderthals were portrayed as primitive and less intelligent. But modern research has reshaped that view. Archaeological evidence shows they created complex stone tools known as Mousterian tools. These tools were carefully shaped from flint using planned techniques. Neanderthals hunted large animals such as bison, reindeer, and even mammoths. Cut marks on bones show organized butchering. They controlled fire regularly. Hearths have been found at many Neanderthal sites, including in caves in France and Israel. Fire provided warmth, protection, and the ability to cook food. There is also evidence suggesting symbolic behavior. In Spain, cave markings in places like La Pasiega and Maltravieso have been dated to over 60,000 years ago, before modern humans reached Europe. These include red pigments and hand stencils. If the dating is correct, Neanderthals may have created some of the earliest known cave art. Personal ornaments have also been discovered. Eagle talons with cut marks found in Croatia suggest that they may have been used as jewelry. Shells with pigment residues in Spain hint at body decoration. These findings challenge the old idea that symbolic thinking belonged only to modern humans. And yet, despite their long survival, Neanderthals disappeared around 40,000 years ago. At roughly the same time, modern humans, Homo sapiens, were spreading into Europe from Africa. Fossils of early modern humans appear in southeastern Europe around 45,000 years ago. Within a few thousand years, Neanderthal populations declined and eventually vanished. One early explanation was simple competition. Modern humans may have had advantages: more advanced tools, better communication, broader social networks. Some researchers suggest that modern humans used projectile weapons like spears thrown from a distance, reducing risk during hunts. Larger trade networks may have allowed modern humans to survive shortages by exchanging resources. But the evidence is not clear-cut. Neanderthals were capable hunters. Their tools were effective. In some regions, their technology overlapped with that of early modern humans. The difference may not have been as dramatic as once believed. Climate instability during this period adds another layer to the story. The Ice Age was marked by abrupt climate swings. Greenland ice cores reveal rapid warming and cooling events. In Europe, forests shifted to open steppe and back again. These changes affected prey animals and vegetation. Neanderthals often lived in small, scattered groups. Genetic studies suggest their populations were relatively low compared to modern humans. Small groups are more vulnerable to environmental stress. A few harsh seasons, a disease outbreak, or reduced food supply could have severe consequences. In 2010, scientists completed the first draft of the Neanderthal genome. The results were groundbreaking. They revealed that Neanderthals and modern humans interbred. Today, most people of European and Asian ancestry carry about 1 to 2% Neanderthal DNA. This means Neanderthals did not simply vanish without a trace. Part of them lives on within us. This genetic blending complicates the extinction narrative. It suggests that in some regions, Neanderthals were absorbed into expanding modern human populations. Rather than a sudden disappearance, there may have been gradual mixing. However, genetic data also indicates that Neanderthal populations had low diversity even before modern humans arrived. Some evidence points to long-term decline. Their effective population size was small, possibly only a few thousand breeding individuals across vast areas. There are also signs of inbreeding in some Neanderthal remains. A skeleton from Denisova Cave in Siberia showed that the individual's parents were closely related. Such patterns suggest limited group sizes and restricted gene flow. Another possibility involves disease. When modern humans migrated out of Africa, they may have carried pathogens to which Neanderthals had little immunity. This theory remains speculative, but disease has shaped many encounters between human populations throughout history. What makes this mystery difficult is the lack of a clear tipping point. There is no single site where Neanderthals suddenly disappear overnight. Instead, the archaeological record shows a gradual thinning. In some regions, Neanderthals persisted longer than in others. In southern Spain, evidence suggests they survived until around 37,000 years ago. The overlap period between Neanderthals and modern humans likely lasted several thousand years. During this time, both groups adapted to changing climates. Both hunted and made tools. Both may have shared similar territories. Some researchers now favor a combination explanation. Climate instability reduced habitable zones. Small population sizes limited resilience. Competition with modern humans added pressure. Interbreeding further blended lineages. Together, these factors may have slowly pushed Neanderthals toward disappearance as a distinct group. It is important to note that Neanderthals were not a failed experiment. They survived for hundreds of thousands of years across some of the harshest environments on Earth. Their extinction does not mean they were inferior. It reflects the complexity of environmental change and population dynamics. Today, museums display Neanderthal skulls and tools. But they are not distant strangers. They are close relatives. Genetic studies show that some of their traits influence modern human biology, including immune responses and even certain physical features. The story of Neanderthals is not one of sudden defeat. It is a story of endurance, adaptation, and gradual change. Despite decades of research, there is still no single agreed-upon reason for their disappearance. Each new discovery, whether a fossil, a tool, or a piece of DNA, adds detail but rarely final answers. Perhaps the most accurate conclusion is that Neanderthals did not vanish in one dramatic moment. They faded through a mix of pressures, shifting climates, limited numbers, encounters with expanding human groups, and genetic blending. In the end, they did not leave entirely. Their legacy remains in our genes, quietly carried forward. The mystery is not just why they disappeared. It is how closely their story is connected to ours. Chapter 10: The End of the Ice Age. What triggered the Great Melt? For more than 2 million years, Earth moved in and out of ice ages. Massive glaciers advanced and retreated across continents. Cold periods lasted tens of thousands of years, followed by warmer intervals. The last major ice age, known as the last glacial maximum, reached its peak around 26,000 years ago. Ice sheets covered much of North America and Northern Europe. Sea levels were dramatically lower. Vast stretches of land lay exposed. But the Ice Age did not end in a single moment. It ended through a long and uneven transition. Around 19,000 years ago, temperatures began to rise gradually. Ice sheets slowly retreated. By about 11,700 years ago, a stable warm period began. This marks the start of the Holocene, the climate era we still live in today. The primary driver of this warming was not volcanic eruptions or sudden impacts. It was something far more subtle: changes in Earth's orbit. The Serbian scientist Milutin Milankovic first proposed in the early 20th century that variations in Earth's orbit affect climate. These changes, now called Milankovic cycles, involve three main factors: the shape of Earth's orbit around the Sun, the tilt of its axis, and the wobble of that axis over time. These cycles alter how much solar energy reaches different parts of the planet, especially in high northern latitudes. When summers become slightly warmer in the northern hemisphere, snow and ice melt more than they accumulate. Over thousands of years, this leads to retreating glaciers. Ice core records from Antarctica and Greenland provide clear evidence of this process. Deep cores drilled at sites like Vostok in Antarctica and the Greenland Ice Sheet Project reveal trapped air bubbles from ancient atmospheres. By measuring gases such as carbon dioxide and methane, scientists can track temperature and greenhouse gas levels across tens of thousands of years. These records show that as temperatures began to rise at the end of the Ice Age, greenhouse gases also increased. Carbon dioxide levels rose from about 180 parts per million during the coldest periods to around 280 parts per million in the early Holocene. Methane levels also increased. The relationship between temperature and greenhouse gases works as a feedback loop. Orbital changes start the warming by increasing sunlight in key regions. As ice melts, darker land and ocean surfaces absorb more heat, amplifying the warming. Warmer oceans release more carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, strengthening the greenhouse effect. The warming was not perfectly smooth. Ice core data shows sharp swings. The younger Dryas, which began around 12,900 years ago, interrupted the warming trend with a sudden return to near glacial conditions. But around 11,700 years ago, temperatures rose sharply once again. This final warming marked the true end of the Ice Age. As glaciers melted, sea levels rose dramatically. During the last glacial maximum, sea levels were about 120 meters lower than today. Coastlines extended far outward. Regions like the North Sea basin were dry land, connecting Britain to mainland Europe. In Southeast Asia, islands were joined into a larger landmass known as Sundaland. As melting accelerated, rising seas submerged these landscapes. Meltwater Pulse 1A, which occurred around 14,600 years ago, may have raised sea levels by several meters within a few centuries. Another rapid rise occurred later in the deglaciation period. These pulses likely caused significant coastal flooding. Ancient river valleys and settlements were lost beneath the ocean. Today, submerged forests have been found off the coasts of Britain and the North Sea. Underwater archaeology continues to explore drowned landscapes, though many sites remain hidden. The retreat of ice sheets reshaped continents. In North America, the Laurentide ice sheet once covered much of Canada and the northern United States. As it melted, it left behind the Great Lakes. Huge volumes of meltwater carved channels and filled basins. Glacial melt also influenced ocean circulation. Fresh water entering the North Atlantic may have disrupted currents, contributing to events like the Younger Dryas. These interactions show how tightly linked ice, ocean, and atmosphere systems are. For humans, the warming brought opportunity and challenge. As climate stabilized around 11,700 years ago, plant and animal communities became more predictable. In the Fertile Crescent of the Middle East, wild cereals such as wheat and barley grew in abundance. Archaeological evidence from sites like Jericho and Göbekli Tepe suggests that humans began forming larger, more permanent settlements during this period. By around 10,000 years ago, evidence of early agriculture appears. People began deliberately planting and harvesting crops. They domesticated animals such as sheep and goats. The stable climate of the Holocene likely made farming possible. Predictable seasons allowed planting and storage. In other regions, humans adapted in different ways. In northern Europe, retreating glaciers opened new lands for settlement. In the Americas, expanding forests and grasslands supported growing populations. Still, questions remain about the speed of change. Ice core records suggest that some temperature shifts occurred within decades. That pace would have been noticeable within a human lifetime. How did small hunter-gatherer groups respond to such changes? Did they migrate quickly? Did they adapt locally? Environmental reconstruction helps answer some of these questions. Pollen preserved in lake sediments shows how vegetation spread northward as temperatures rose. Animal bones in archaeological sites reveal shifts in prey species. Together, these clues show that humans followed the moving boundaries of ecosystems. The transition into the Holocene did not mean an end to climate change. Even within this warm period, fluctuations occurred. But compared to the Ice Age, the Holocene has been remarkably stable. That stability allowed civilizations to rise. Agriculture expanded, villages became towns, towns became cities. Writing systems developed, complex societies formed. The end of the Ice Age was not a dramatic explosion or a single event. It was a long transformation driven by orbital cycles, amplified by greenhouse gases, and marked by rising seas and melting ice. Yet there are still mysteries. Scientists continue to debate how rapidly certain ice sheets collapsed. Did parts of Antarctica melt faster than expected? How much did meltwater pulses affect early coastal communities? Could abrupt changes happen again under different conditions? Ice cores, sediment records, and climate models grow more detailed every year. They tell us that Earth's climate system is powerful and interconnected. Small changes in sunlight distribution can trigger vast transformations over time. Around 11,700 years ago, the planet crossed a threshold. The ice retreated, the climate stabilized. Humans stepped into a new chapter of history. The Great Melt was not just the end of an era. It was the beginning of the world we recognize, a world of coastlines, forests, rivers, and growing settlements. The Ice Age shaped humanity. Its end reshaped everything.